Hi, this is David, and this video replaces the Utah Educational Mormon System video that got lost, kind of like the 116 pages that Joseph Smith lost. I'm sure it was Satan, or it might have been Jesus, or it could have been the Danites, I don't know. But the first section here wasn't recorded. And I'm going to record it again. There's a second section of this. This is the beginning of the Utah Mormon Educational Code. The other video is the end. I came into the state of Utah from California. I've lived in Missouri. I've lived in Massachusetts, Utah, and California. So I've traveled. I've been in the South. I've been in the East. And I've been a little bit up in Canada when I was young. The point that I'm making is that I have a certain amount of background, experience, education in special education. I have raised an autistic son. He's now 26 with an IQ of 52, and I took him through the California and Oklahoma short time special education system. Let me tell you something about Utah. You're not going to believe. You're going to have to go look on the internet and go, you know, is David nuts? Those things can't go on in any state government. Well, they do. When I first came, we were in the South or Jordan School District. And we had adopted two little Filipino girls that were in the elementary school system in Jordan. But they weren't into the United States yet. They were living in our house in the Philippines. Well, when I went to the school district and I said, gee, these little girls can't speak English, and to bring them into this country, not speaking any English and into your school system, I don't think is fair. And I think English is a second language, and 504 certainly. But we don't know what their IQs are. They may be qualified for special education services. Well, all you have to do is say that in a Utah school or a district meeting or whatever, and probably 80% of the authorities in Utah who are supposed to know special education will faint right on the floor because they see dollar signs. They go, these retarded kids, and these are not you know, socially accepted terms anymore. We don't want kids in wheelchairs. We don't want kids on oxygen. We don't want kids with nurses and aides in the classroom. Good Lord. The reason those kids are retarded and the reason they're defective is their parents didn't pay their tithing. Their parents are wicked, evil people. In fact, some of them never even joined the Mormon church, and we know from Jesus that anyone that has a defective member of their family is an apostate and an evil person. Well, when that religious attitude permeates through the school systems, you've got a snowball's chance in hell of getting any kinds of services for children that need it. Now, I'd already raised my son, and it was in Ojai, California. I'm not going to piddle around on names and whatever, but the school system there spent almost $1 million on educating my autistic son. Now, did they come forward and go, gee, here's $1 million, David family, why don't you just go ahead and spend it the way you want? Of course not. Of course not. But because of my background and my experience with 504 and also federal special education and No Child Behind, and some of these more complex statutes, I began to be a real advocate. And in Ojai, I basically had my son have a tutor in physical education and a tutor in the classroom, and eventually he had his own cubicle with a computer in it in the classroom. And I have to admit, they worked hard, and yeah, I have to admit, I sued him twice. And that does open a school district's eyes. But as confrontational as that was in getting the services, Utah is entirely a different state with the Mormon Church. I'm telling you, the Mormon church cult permeates the school system, the financial system, the banking system, buying a car. I don't care what you do, the grocery store, and in cahoots with the school with box tops from cereal. Utah is proud of the fact, go look on the computer, don't believe David, go look on the computer, the fact that they spend the least amount of money on the education of their children per student than any other state in the United States. Boy, that's something to be proud of. That's really something to be proud of. Watch the Mormon mouth. We love our children. We would do anything. Then watch what they do. Watch what they do. That's the judgment. They will talk the talk, but they seldom walk the walk. So I said to the school system, could we get maybe a teacher twice a week to be on the computer? I'll get them a computer in the Philippines and just spend 15, 20 minutes with them on learning English. This is what they said to me. This is what Jordan's school system said to me. Well, you probably can tell from my videos and my personality, that doesn't go over well with me. So I sued their ass. So, here's what you get in Utah when you go into the justice. I love that word, the justice system. There's no justice in Utah. If you're not wearing garments, if you're not a member of the church, you might as well bend over in court and kiss your ass goodbye. You're going down the point of the mountain, the state prison, or you're going to have a record and you're not going to be able to have clearance at the airport, and they will screw your life up. Well, I was a little bit younger, a little bit dumber, and so I sued them because I know the law in special ed, and it's federal. It's not state. The state can twist and turn the law as long as it's not less than the federal government requirements. Well, Utah, anytime you give a Mormon freedom, they don't know what the hell to do with it. They got no common sense. You know, they build a $5 billion mall in the ghetto of Salt Lake City and think all the senior citizens are going to run down there and pay $500,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment that looks over where the homeless walk around in Park, not Liberty, Pioneer Park. This makes sense to the prophet who speaks with Jesus, I guess, daily. And Jesus said, I don't have them all. Build me a mall. So we start the court process, and the school district now has to get an attorney. Well, the attorney, the retainer on the attorney was probably $5,000. And then we have to get an administrative judge to sit over the hearing so I can present my information and the school district's attorney can present their information. Well, we got a judge, and I thought, gosh, this is like Oklahoma or Massachusetts or California. These hearings are held all the time, parents saying, gee, I don't agree. Well, let me tell you about Mormons. Let me tell you about Mormons. Let me demonstrate what they do the best. Bow your head and say yes and never make a complaint. Their temple says, no evil speaking of the Lord's anointed. Everyone's the Lord's anointed to the Mormons, so you don't make complaints. So when I investigated this administrative judge's background, he had carried on in 20 years one case, and decided against the parent. So I went to the state of Utah and I said, you know, WTF? And they go, well, we just don't get that many complaints. Huh, I wonder why. All the parents, they should know their rights? Well, yeah, they know their rights. And I said, well, don't you give out at the beginning of the year? The federal government requires that you give out the parental rights pamphlet printed by the federal government. Well, we reprinted that form. I said, well, I didn't get one. You can go in to the principal. They'll give you one. I said, yeah, but you're supposed to give that to every parent so they're all informed of what their rights are. Well, we don't do that. Now I'm starting to smell shit. Now I'm starting to smell shit. And sure enough, I was right. I asked the judge to recluse himself and let another judge objectively come in that had more experience. Oh, that went over like a turd in the punch bowl. He goes to the next judge up, who is the mission president of where the judge's son is serving in France. Do you think he's going to say, oh, you can't be objective in this one. You don't have enough experience. This is an international question. I think that we should get another judge. Laugh my ass off. No. He looked at me and went like this. Now this is the sign, the tokens, and the symbols of the Mormon Church. You're not a member, fuck you. You're not a member, fuck you. You have no rights. The judicial system is run by us, and we will implement it the way we want to. Long story short, we had the hearing, and when I went in, the opposing counsel, which was with a very prominent law firm in downtown Salt Lake City, very expensive, and their whole specialty was fighting parents in special education cases in Utah. So I'm up against the best. And I notice as we start the hearing that she's smiling at the judge. And I said, could we put it on the record? Of course, it was all taped. And I have, 20 CDs in there for days and days of a hearing. Could we put it on the record that the opposing counsel is smiling and making friendly gestures to the judge? It appears that they either know each other or would like to know each other. So opposing counsel said, well, I object to Mr. David's basically tenet there that yes, the judge and I know each other, but it's on a professional level. Well, her professional level might have been prostitution from what I saw. Just speculating. I had to put that on the record 9 or 10 times in 3-day hearing that the two of them were playing back and forth. The judge knew her. She knew him. They went to judicial meetings together. Maybe they went to the same law school. I don't know. But I'm starting to get the feeling my case is going nowhere. So I called in witnesses. I called in the school district witnesses, the principal, the special education people. Half of them didn't know the federal law at all. And the ones that did have basically said, well, Utah has a different approach to that. We have a certain amount of freedom to rewrite the law. And I said, yeah, I noticed that, and it was in the hearing, and it was with the State Department of Education witness. And I said, I understand, and please tell me if this is not true, that the state of Utah is under a probationary period with the federal government because you are not educating special ed kids. Your tests are slanted away from giving children services, and you get to keep the money the federal government sends you if you can provide services that don't cost that much. So the Department of Education can raise their own salaries, they can raise their own perks on the backs of the children who were supposed to get that money. I'm not familiar with that complexity. And their attorney would look at him and just shake her head a little bit, and they'd say, I don't know. I don't know. No, I'm in there alone. Pages and pages of documentation of the Utah special education system. The law requires them to mainstream kids. That means if you're in a wheelchair, you're on oxygen, or you've got other kind, no legs, whatever. You're supposed to be in a regular classroom if it can be done. If you need an aide or you need a nurse, the schools and state monies are supposed to provide that. They don't. They have one school where all the wheelchairs and all the oxygen tanks and all of the handicapped children go. So those kids think everybody in the world has the same disabilities. They don't have to deal with the social ramifications of being disabled. And the school district can hire one teacher and have 20 kids in a wheelchair and an aide in the classroom and pay $12 or $15, maybe $25,000 a year for the two of them, rather than $100,000 a year for doing what the federal government requires. Well, a long story short, we have the hearing. It goes on and on. I call witnesses in on Christmas and Thanksgiving. That was a pleasure for me because I knew the judge had no experience, and I knew he knew opposing counsel, and I knew that the tangled webs we weave when at first we deceive. So I was basically asking for, 20 minutes, 2 days a week for a teacher, just a computer into the Philippines to help my kids with English. Their side of the story, and certainly my tapes show this, and if they watch this, they'll certainly confirm it, the kids are not U.S. citizens. And I said to them, they don't have to be U.S. citizens. The illegal aliens and Mexicans and other countries that are in our country, their children are not citizens, but they get these services. Well, they're not in the country. I said, but we own 2 houses. Their residency is in our home in the Philippines. Well, we don't recognize residency as the turning point of this discussion. I said, look, here's Black's dictionary on what a residency is. They qualify 100%. Well, I'm not going to argue the case a second time. Whatever you tell a Mormon that is factual, they'll twist it and turn it into a cult deflection, and you will not get services in Utah. You will not get them in Utah. You don't even get the pamphlet that tells you you can go to the school in 2 sentences, have your children tested. You don't know that. I knew that because I came from other states and I know the federal law. They don't obey. And I have a tape on Mormons obeying the law, and I'm giving you a testimony. It happened to me. My eyes saw this. My ears heard this. So we battled for 3-4 days, whatever it was, and we had, stenographers there and cameras. It must have cost them $30,000. But that's okay, because they could save $3,000 by just having the teacher email to the children. These Mormons are vicious. They're violent, they're hateful, and they will talk to you and wear a little light shirt, and the girls have little blouses, and there's quiet, and here's some chocolate chip cookies, and then you get this. Then you get this. Well, I'm an advocate for my children. So I asked him, I said, well, I've noticed that your Utah tests that you've made up slant away from special ed services. Isn't it true that a child has to be in the 2nd percentile to receive services in Utah and qualify? Well, and they go into the Mormon dance. And you hear shit and testimonies, how well we do with our kids, and testimonies, Relief Society presidents and psychologists that back all this crap up. Well, one day, the Jordan district, I finally walked out, and the opposing counsel jumped up and down, and she says, you're to order him attorney fees, because they were like $25,000 or $30,000. And the judge looked at her and he says, I can't. He has a right to leave the hearing any time, and the hearing becomes dead. They were pissed. They traded $2,000 or $3,000 for $30,000, but they won. My kids finally came into the state, and they're getting services now. What is wrong with that picture? Well, that was my one experience with special ed. The second one is worse. The Utah Mormon educational system is so flawed and so slanted towards the Aryan kids. If your kid's white and your kid came through the canyon with Brigham Young, God, you're going to go to Harvard. You're going to go to Yale. If your kid came from the Philippines, from the jungle, No matter what their grades are, no matter how well they matriculate, there's dog shit. We don't do anything for them. They're defective people because they weren't born in the United States. The Mormon Church believes if you're born in this country, you are Aryan privileged. If you're born in another country, you didn't do as well in the pre-existence. You were a fence setter. And so you need to suffer more. So we move to the next school district. We go there and I see the tests are just, and I have a background. I have a right. I have statistical expertise. I have a right in special education. I've spent my whole life, and I've spent most of my schooling in special ed, federal law, state law, 504, special ed, accommodations, the Americans with Disability Act. I know that stuff. I went to school. So, I told them, your tests are not objective, and they're not standardized tests that have been given to school children for years and years and years throughout our country that have proved that they're reliable and that the information you get is accurate. Well, we don't have to use those tests. I said, well, the reason you don't use them is they're like $200 to use the test and maybe $150 to grade it. Well, money has nothing, and watch their lips. Watch their lips! Money has nothing to do with this. We love kids and we want to treat them fairly. Look what they do. So I finally say to them, I don't believe in your test. I think we ought to go to standardized testing so I really know where my kids stand compared to all the other 6th graders and 3rd graders in the United States. Then we can plan, do they need special ed services? Are they qualified? And can we provide special education for these children? Well, I came back in one day. You're not going to believe this. You are not, because I'm sitting here thinking all the years I've spent in the educational systems of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, I'm sorry, not New Hampshire, Kansas, Missouri, Utah, and California. This ain't my first rodeo. So I come in to see the results of the test. My kids are down in the 2nd and 3rd percentile, which means 97% of the kids in the United States are smarter than my kids. My kids are a couple of dummies. I knew they weren't, and I said, well, gee, we need to, provide some services. They said, well, our Utah test said that we don't need to provide services. And we were standing in an office area there, public, and I can hardly even say this crap. Every Mormon facility, area, school district, church office building, temple, school, I don't care what, it is owned by the Mormon Church. They're security guards, and they're all dressed so you can't tell who they are. I was a security guard here in Utah, passed the test, legitimate, and we had to identify with patches and hats that we were security. But the Mormon Church doesn't. They can just dress their people like tourists and look around, and they can just get you. So I'm standing here in the special education department of the Davis School District, and they started telling me how good they were and how well their kids do. And I was standing there, and this guy, big guy, comes into the room, and he just stands over to the side of the room. And I said to the females that were doing the testing, I said, well, I don't want to hear you bearing your testimonies to me. I want to see the numbers. I said it in a voice that I'm saying it to you. There's no reason for me to be, obnoxious in a public school system. The guard, the Secret Service, the day-night, takes me by the arm and escorts me into an empty room where the police were standing there in uniforms. I thought, what have I done that, requires police intervention? The big boy identifies himself as a retired police officer. I said, okay, what's the deal here? Well, we just don't like the things that you say when you come in here, and we kind of feel like you may be a danger. I said, well, have I thrown anything or yelled at anybody or or threatened anyone? Well, no, but your tone and your inflection and your voice we don't like. Let me tell you something about the Mormons. If they don't like you, they will get your hair cut as an excuse. They will get your tone, your inflection. I don't give a shit if you think you're going to be treated fairly in the state of Utah in the educational system. So I said, well, I apologize for that. I don't mean to come across that way. He said, well, look at this piece of paper. So he hands me a pink piece of paper, and I looked on it. It's a no trespass order. And I speed read it, and I look down on it. He says, did you read that? I said, yes, sir. He says, do you understand it? I said, yes, sir. I have a little bit of a law background. It's a no trespass order. He says, that's right. If you step on one piece of property of the Davis School District, we will have you arrested. I said, well, then how can I go to my children's Christmas play? You can't. Well, how can I drop them off at school? You can't. Well, how do I know? Some of the parks and the tennis courts and the basketball courts may be owned by the school. What if I accidentally step on them? You will be arrested. So, oh. Well, it's at this point, you know, you have to have some common sense. This guy was out of control. And the police of the city there were standing there. And it wasn't a time for me to stand up and say, you know, you got shit for brains. That wasn't my time. That time came, but it wasn't then. So I said, okay. So I went down to the police department, and they had a copy of that report. Well, I'm pretty good at typing letters and professional this and that. And, you know, I threatened to sue them, which I did. And that was a hard defense position for them to maintain because I hadn't done anything, but they knew that I would be in front of a Mormon jury and a Mormon judge. You don't have to do anything. Just be a non-member. You're guilty. You're guilty. Out. Off with his head. As Alice in Wonderland would say. So, we had a big meeting. And it was at the school district. I had to get special permission to walk on the campus to go to the meeting to talk about the lawsuit. I did. And I'm just shaking my head because I can't believe. I used to believe this crap. For 50 years, I gave that organization my love, my support, my money, my wives, my family. This is how they're going to treat me. I've never seen them like this. Now, I've seen them like this many times. Well, anyway, they dropped the law. I dropped the lawsuit because they dropped the no trespass order, and they gave services, 504 services, which is accommodation services, to my children, which was greatly helpful. And my children now, after a year and a half there, they're right in the 50 percentile, which means they're normal kids. Half are smarter, half are dumber than my kids. Let me tell you what Homie the Clown did that was the retired police officer. You're not going to believe this because when I say it, I can't believe it. I've never ever seen anything like this in a state educational system. I went over to the state education office. It's a public building. They have a guard. Mormons have a guard everywhere because they're so obnoxious, they're so hated, that people would just bring guns in and shoot them in the face. So I said, he asked me my business, and I said, well, I'm going up to see the director of special education. He said, what's your name? And I told him, and he said on his list, he says, you're not allowed in the building. I said, what do you mean? This is a public building. Why aren't I allowed? What court order has said that I'm not allowed? He says, well, it's not a court order. It's the order of the Department of Education. You can't come in this building. Now again, watch when you cross these people. Watch, because you've got 2 strikes against you before you ever start. And if it goes to court, Utah Supreme Court, kiss your ass goodbye. And if it goes to the 9th District over in Colorado, kiss your ass goodbye again, because one of the Mormons, he always takes the Mormon cases from Utah. You go higher than that, you get justice. So I said, well, I'll quietly leave, and I did. Well, the big non-retired, or the retired, no longer policeman, non-policeman guy, who grabbed me and put me into the room, and put down with a big smile on his face, he knew how to get a temporary or a permanent restraining order. So one night I'm sitting at my home, and it was during it was a week or two, a month that these things went on. The doorbell rings. Okay, so I go over to the door, and here's this asshole. And I have a big sign on my door that says, "No trespassing, no soliciting." I said to him, "Can you read? Have you been in school?" He says, "Well, this is an apartment building. You own the inside of the door, but not the outside." I said, "What the hell are you doing on front of my door and my property?" And he starts to step into the house, at the threshold. Now I know, trespass law, and that's a trespass. As long as he stayed outside, I couldn't order him off the property because I didn't own it. It was an apartment complex, and there's a complexity there. And so I began to shut the door on his foot, and he pushed the door open. Now that's also trespass. And then he stands there like a Bigfoot, and he starts kind of chest-butting me. Now, I know my rights now, and I know how hard this is to defend, even in a Mormon court. So he's chest-butting me, and he's trying to serve me with some kind of a paper. And I started chest-butting him back, and then finally I pushed his ass down on the staircase, and I told him, "Get the fuck out of my life. You don't belong here. Get out of here." Well, now people are looking, and people are going, "Geez, what's going on there?" So I knew he went right to his car to call the police. So I went, "I know these people. I know these people. The first one that tells their story is the right one." So I ran over to my phone and I called the police. I said, "I got an asshole over here that's chest-butting me, trying to serve papers, and is doing all kinds of legal stuff and making a fool of himself in the community." He said, "We'll be right over." I beat him. I beat him. So 4 or 5 officers show up, lights flashing, bullshit going on. Oh, Jesus. So I tell the police my side of the story. They separate us. He tells them his side of the story, and he's going, "I'm a retired policeman. Here's my old badge, and I used to work here, and me and you are cult members. See my garments, and I can see yours through your shirt. We're going to get him. We're going to get the apostate, because he's standing up for himself. He's not supposed to do that in our state." So I had a really nice policeman, and I told him, I said, he started to step over the threshold, and he pushed my door open, and then started chest-butting me, and I had a right to defend myself. And he says, "Yes, you did." And he said, "We'll see that he doesn't return to this property." Yeah, so one for the Gipper, one for the Gipper. Just to try to get educational services for my children. This is the other part of my tape. This is the beginning. There's another section of it. What can I say? This is the most vile, evil cult I have ever seen. And when these people cluster together, they don't need rules and regulations and laws. They don't have to obey the law. I do, but they don't. They write the test. They won't give special education services. You try to go to a fair hearing. It's not fair. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody's wearing garments but you, and your kids have dark skin. Ooh, does that have anything to do? My kids have dark skin. You bet your ass. Go read the damn Book of Mormon. Go read it. The Lamanites were dark-skinned people. And blacks and dark-skinned people in Utah school districts, they're not welcome. Now, you'll see their lips move like this, and they'll, "Oh, we love everybody. Look, I have a shirt and a tie on, and I'm a gentle person. I have my voice down. We love black people. We love brown people." Don't listen to what they say. Listen to what they do. Why would I sit here and spend this time speaking to you if I'm making this up? This kind of stuff you can't make up. It is so insane, no writer could write it. These people are hateful. Watch out. This is my experience, my eyes, my ears. I'm not telling a story. I'm not representing a group. I'm not making money. I'm not trying to get famous. I don't care if anyone sees this tape. It is therapeutic for me that I can talk to this camera and say, you know what? I got screwed. My kids got screwed. And I have had to fight and fight and fight. Now, let me tell you one story to end what I'm saying. There's a little boy, I think he was 17, 8, well, he must have been 18 because he was down in the jail, down at the point of the mountain, the state prison. And he belonged in Granite School District, which is right downtown in Salt Lake. And he had special education services. Evidently, he was retarded enough or had, you know, some kind of physical disability. I don't know that part of the story, but I know the other part because I've read it. Not in a magazine, in a law book. It's a case. It's a case that's been decided. You can go right into a law library and look up Granite School District versus whatever his name was. There it is. You can read the abstract. You can read the trial's transcript. This little boy wanted a couple of pencils to do his homework. He's in special ed down there, and he wanted a couple of pencils, and he and his attorney said that the school district is supposed to provide those for him. What is it? 75 cents to buy 2 damn pencils? Send it over with his attorney, but not for the Mormons. Not for the Mormons. They're not going to take advantage of us. You know what Granite School District did? They sued him. This 18-year-old boy has no resources. He's in jail. They sued him. And it went here in Utah, then to the 9th District, where the Mormon 9th District judge took the case and agreed with Utah. There is a provision in the special education law that they do not have to provide pencils. Granite School District spent over $150, maybe $200,000 in attorney fees, court fees, and appeal fees to prove they were right. We're right. We're Mormons. God is on our side. See, Jesus had us win. We didn't have to give that kid pencils. Granite School District was right. They knew the letter of the law. I wonder if they knew the spirit of the law. Don't listen to what the Mormons say or what they print. Anything they print and anything they say is done by public relation firms that try to hold up their image. And the firms are all Mormon, and they're pretty good. They're pretty good at trying to make Mormons look normal and natural. They certainly are wolves in sheep clothing. They look like they're innocent little sheep. But I just told you, I've only been in the state a few years. Of course, I went to BYU also. Well, I'm not giving my location away, so the Danites will be able to find me. And I've had 2 encounters with 2 totally separate school districts. And look how I was treated in both districts. In California, I was never treated that way. Oklahoma, I was never treated that way. In Massachusetts, I was never treated that way. In Kansas, I wasn't. And in Missouri, I wasn't. But in Utah, I was. I'm telling you my experience. There are witnesses, there's testimony, there's court documents. You can get whatever you want. And I have a copy of about 15 or 20 discs down in my filing cabinet that this whole thing is recorded. So, if I'm lying, I'm dying. And I ain't dying. These people run every system in the state of Utah. I don't care if it's the police department. I don't care if it's the educational system. I don't care if it's the DMV. I don't care what government agency and many private agencies are Mormons. When the Mormon missionaries were knocking on my damn door, I went over to the city hall. I said, let me talk to the city attorney. And I said, you know, the Mormons are coming in, and we have a no solicitation sign out front, and they're coming right by that sign and pounding on doors and tracting. He said, well, that's okay. And I said, it is? He says, yeah, they don't solicit. I said, well, I've called the mission president and I've called the stake president. He says, oh yeah, I know him. Bend over, kiss your ass goodbye. And I said, well, they're soliciting. He says, no, I said, you have a solicitation law here in this municipality. Well, yeah, we do, but we don't enforce it against the Mormons. Gee, am I surprised? It doesn't matter what the law says. It doesn't matter what they say. It matters what they do. They pound on the door, and I put a no solicitation sign up on my damn door. 2 weeks later, they ripped it off. Who am I going to complain to? The city attorney? So I had to finally write a letter to the stake president and threaten to sue him. I said, if any more missionaries show up at that door, or you paste on that door your sacrament meeting schedule and your parties for kids and whatever, I said, I'm going to sue you. Well, I get a letter from the law firm down in Salt Lake, and they always use the best law firms. And I said, well, you guys solicit. And the attorney wrote back to me the same, and the Mormons, all the cult members, I don't care if it's a doctor, I don't care if it's a dentist, I don't care if it's an attorney. They've all been raised in the cult with this thinking, this jibber-jabber thinking of no matter what you say to them, they deflect it, and then they ask a question, and then they answer it. So he tried to bullshit with me, and he said, you know, they're allowed to solicit. They're a private religious organization under the freedom of information or freedom of religion. And so I wrote him back and I said, well, you know what? Let me tell you something. I said, I'm a handicapped person under the laws of the United States. I can sue you personally. When you sign the bottom of this letter, I can sue you. I can sue judges. I can sue any human being in any organization and not include the organization. Do you understand what I'm saying as a handicapped person under the ADA federal rules that you Mormons hate, but they will kick your ass, that I will sue you? You represent these people. You are the one that is in charge, like you said in your first letter. You're in charge. So, I will focus on you. If you want to be sued by the handicap law, be my guest. Well, we don't have any missionaries anymore. We don't have anything taped to our door anymore. Let me leave. You know, sometimes someone said I rambled. I do. I do. When we first moved in, the lady across the way, oh gosh, she was smiling, sweet, and she had her little Relief Society dress on, and no doubt she'd been in the Relief Society presidency. And I woke up one morning, she had her house for sale, and she had open house and people walking in to see her place to buy. And I woke up one morning, and our kitchen window faces out onto her door. And on my property, on my kitchen window, she writes, "You need to close your curtains." I didn't know it was her. She didn't sign it. Mormons never sign. They never want to know, people to know it was them. And they're representing their moral system. I had to ask around, you know, maybe our curtains are open and someone's got a telescope and they're looking at my wife and they're just trying to help us. Well, it wasn't that bad. It was her, I found. And, you know, I tore the sign down, and I'm a reasonable person. Now, maybe when you're looking at me here, I'm not real reasonable because I've been abused. And abused people have emotion, and we have triggers. So I let it go. She's old. Let it go. So, 2 days later, I go to the kitchen, get some cereal, and I look at my window again. Here's a new note, and it's bigger. Now I'm pissed. Now I go over to her house and I go, WTF. Why are you putting this? And she said, well, everyone closes that window and puts their blinds over it. I said, well, I'm not everyone. Maybe you can tell from my videos. I said, I'm not everybody, and if I want my window open, I'm going to leave it open. You can't do that. I said, watch me. So I wrote to the association. They wanted to side with the woman, but they really couldn't because it was in the CC&Rs. And they finally wrote her a note and said, leave him alone. Just stop it. Leave him alone. And I got thinking about it a couple of weeks later. Why would she be so upset that my windows are open? She's a Mormon. My skin, or my wife and my children's skin is brown. She's trying to sell her house. And people are coming in that are Mormons and they look across. We're going to live with the brown-skinned people across the way. And she thought it lowered, and it probably did in Utah, lowered the price of her residential property. That's why she wanted my curtains closed. Don't tell me these people don't hate blacks and brown-skinned people. Half of my family is brown-skinned. My son is married to an Argentine girl. My returned missionary daughter is married to a man from Ecuador. There's nothing more to say. There's nothing more to say. I'm not speaking for a group. I'm not trying to get you out of the Mormon church. I don't give a rat's ass. If you like the way they present themselves, for God's sakes, pay your money and go to the mall. Pay your money and go to the mall. Stay in the cult. It makes you happy. It floats your boat. That's fine. But you know what? I'm fine too. I don't have to be intimidated, threatened, and have the quality of my life lowered because I don't believe the way you do. You don't believe the way I do. I don't believe the way you do. Doesn't that sound fair? Or has the cult stomped out so much common sense you can't even spell the word fair? Your lips can move and say, oh, we're fair. What I've told you here, you're not fair. What you've done is not fair. What you've said is fair. Wonderful. What you've done is hateful and evil. Thanks for watching.